Hey there, and welcome back to History for Sleep. I'm so glad you're here. Today, I would like to walk you through the life of Cleopatra. But before that, don't forget to subscribe, and comment down below from which part of the world you are listening this. Let's begin. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt, yet not a queen only in name or crown, but in breath, in gesture, and in the language of stars. Cleopatra, the seventh Philopator, daughter of the Ptolemaic line, bore not of Egyptian blood, but of Greek descent, moved through the halls of Alexandria with a presence both silken and sharp, like a tide wrapped in perfume and shadow. Her name, whispered in marble courts and on the wind between desert dunes, meant more than rulership. It meant vision, intellect, and myth woven into the living flesh of history. And yet, for all the war and politics, the embassies, and the ambitions that surrounded her, there were days when the sun rose slowly behind the pillars of her palace, and time softened its hands, and she was simply a woman moving through the breath of the world, a queen in silk slippers, rising, not for conquest, but for rhythm, ritual, and rest. And so, let us drift into one such day. Not a day carved in the bronze of battle or on the tongues of senators, but a quieter day, slow and golden, beneath the sky of ancient Alexandria. A day we will observe like a whisper caught on the Nile, floating lazily downstream past gardens, corridors, and moonlit reflections. The air is warm, the earth is still. Let us begin. The morning begins not with fanfare, but with silence. A vast, weightless hush that settles over the royal chambers, like linen drawn gently across still water. High above the city of Alexandria, where the palace meets the sky, the pale blush of dawn stretches across the horizon, touching the domes and towers with the softest suggestion of gold. The air is fragrant, hints of rosewater, crushed lotus, and the faintest whisper of incense drift lazily beneath the great carved ceilings. The Nile, just visible beyond the colonnades, mirrors the sky with that smooth, endless glass that only very early water can hold. Cleopatra awakens slowly, without rush. She does not leap from her silken bedding, nor does she summon her court. The day, as it always has, comes to her step by step, like a procession of soft sandals on marble. She lies there for a while, the queen of the two lands, wrapped in fine linen, her skin still carrying the scent of last night's perfumed oils, her eyelids heavy with the comfort of sleep not yet broken. Her chamber is vast but quiet. No sound of urgent messengers or stomping soldiers. No echo of Greek debate or Roman Latin in angry tones. Only the coo of doves on the balcony rail and the slow rhythmic rustle of papyrus vines stirred by the breeze from the sea. The ceiling is painted deep blue, studded with tiny golden stars, a recreation of Nut, the sky goddess, watching silently over her as she sleeps. Her bed rests upon a low platform of carved ebony, draped in sheets imported from India, soft as the desert's breath after twilight. Eventually, the queen opens her eyes, not because she must, but because it is timed at her hand, adorned not yet, in gold, but bare, smooth, and soft, brushes gently across the silken bedclothes. She sits upright, slowly, her black hair tumbling around her shoulders, only slightly disheveled, catching hints of the morning light that now slants through the lattice screens of the chamber. A girl, young and silent, steps forward from the shadowed edge of the room. She bows, not deeply, but reverently, and without speaking, draws back the outer curtain of linen, letting the early sun pour across the marble floor like warm milk spilling in quiet rivulets. Cleopatra rises. She walks barefoot to the balcony. The coolness of the polished stone under her feet sends a slow sensation through her. Not a jolt, but a reminder. The world is waiting, but not hurrying. Beyond the palace, Alexandria breathes. Its rooftops shimmer with dew. Its white limestone streets slowly fill with traders, priests, scholars, and the ordinary rhythms of those who do not wear crowns, but whose hands shape the city all the same. She watches them from above, not with detachment, but with curiosity. She listens to the wind, heavy with salt and olive groves, and closes her eyes. The sea, the eternal sea, lapping gently at the harbors below. Ships sway in their moorings. Flags ripple. Voices rise in the early hush of commerce and labor. But here, above it all, Cleopatra remains still. A figure not carved in stone, but living, breathing, thinking. A gentle knock echoes. A priestess enters, one of Isis's attendants, her white robes clean, her head shaven smooth, her expression peaceful. She bows low and whispers the daily invocation. A moment of reverence. The gods, after all, are never far, especially not for a queen who claims divine lineage. The morning bathing ritual begins. Servants move like water, quiet, graceful, and practiced. A copper basin is brought, filled with warmed milk and rose petals. She sits upon a cushioned stool, and the ritual unfolds. Hair is combed, skin is bathed, nails are gently shaped. Oils of almond, myrrh, and sandalwood are massaged into her shoulders and arms. All this is done in silence, not of fear, but of respect. Cleopatra prefers it this way. A calm before the decisions. The ceremony before the day. Her face is not masked in powder or painted harshly. No, cosmetics are applied not to disguise, but to celebrate. Kohl is drawn gently beneath her eyes, not to hide, but to protect from the sun, and to deepen the gaze that has held emperors in stillness. A subtle rouge, a light perfume from far-off Nubia. Everything applied with care, with intention. She is not dressing for war. She is dressing for presence, for serenity, for being seen by the day, not conquering it. Draped now in soft linen, gold adornments still waiting in their chests, Cleopatra steps once more into the sunlight of the balcony. Below, the city is fully awake. The library of Alexandria casts a long shadow down the marble causeways. Scrolls are already being read. Philosophers argue gently. Fishermen cast their nets. Children chase one another between vendors' carts. And in the royal gardens, the fig trees sway slightly in the breeze. Cleopatra takes a breath, not a sigh, not a command, simply a breath, and so her day truly begins. She descends the palace steps, not in procession, but in solitude, her sandals soft against the warm stone. The morning air is sweet now, filled with the scent of crushed basil and the far-off trace of orange blossoms drifting from a merchant's courtyard. Servants bow low as she passes, but she says nothing, only nods gently, her mind already floating. Into the stillness of the day, the royal gardens embrace her like memory, familiar, forgiving, and full of quiet purpose. Fig trees heavy with fruit droop lazily in the breeze. Vines curl on columns in slow, affectionate spirals. A fountain murmurs in the distance, its voice lost beneath the rustle of palms. She walks slowly, trailing her fingers along a low wall of polished limestone, feeling the sun warm the skin of her hand as if it were an old friend. She pauses beneath the shade of a tamarisk tree. Here, time unspools. A gardener nearby moves with quiet reverence, pruning a vine with a bronze blade, worn smooth by use. He glances up only once, sees her silhouette among the leaves, and returns to his work, careful, precise, honored. In Cleopatra's Egypt, every role has meaning, every task its place in the larger breathing body of the city. She sits on a stone bench, carved centuries ago by artisans whose names have long since melted into sand. Before her, a reflecting pool lies perfectly still, mirroring the canopy of green above. Small birds flit through the air, hopping between lotus leaves and humming softly to one another in a language too simple to decode and too ancient to ignore. From a small clay dish, she takes a handful of pomegranate seeds, tart and ruby red. Their juice stains her fingertips. She does not mind. It reminds her of childhood, of simpler mornings in these same gardens when she ran barefoot through damp grass, laughing with her younger siblings, unaware of the weight that one day would rest upon her brow. The past does not visit her with regret, only with breath. A soft reminder carried on the wind. A scribe approaches quietly. He carries a scroll bound in dyed linen. He sits at her feet, not low in submission, but comfortably, respectfully. Cleopatra gestures for the scroll to be opened, and the papyrus unfurls like the wings of a heron, marked in steady hand with the words of philosophers long gone. Today's reading is from Plato, his letters translated into Egyptian for her. Benefit, though she speaks Greek, Latin, Aramaic, and the tongue of the Upper Nile. The words pass between them in calm cadence. She listens, eyes half closed, absorbing not just the meaning, but the rhythm. Philosophy for Cleopatra is not merely an exercise of the mind. It is a texture of thought, a way of touching thee. World. As the scribe reads, her fingers trace a lotus blossom beside her. She finds the edge of the petal and holds it between two fingers, delicate, trembling slightly in the breeze. The scroll is rolled again. She nods once. The scribe withdraws. Midday arrives like a sigh, soft and golden, casting long shadows. Along the paths of the garden, a slave boy arrives with a silver basin and pours cool water over her hands. She dries them slowly with a piece of linen, the threads catching sunlight. A second servant offers her a sweet made of dates and honey. She eats it in small bites, each one savored without urgency. There is no need to rush. Not in this hour. Not in this garden dot from the palace portico. A procession of musicians begins their soft approach. They carry lutes, flutes, and lyres, carved of cedar and ivory. No one is summoned. No festival declared. But Cleopatra enjoys the sound of strings. In the heat of the afternoon, the players set themselves beneath a palm and begin gently, letting the notes float upward like dandelion seeds on still air. She reclines now on a low couch brought to the garden's edge, shaded by woven reeds. Her eyes drift upward to the sky, to the branches, to the lazy spin of a single white feather drifting down from nowhere in particular. She smiles. The music continues. Slow, cyclical, dreamlike. Hours pass. Later, as the afternoon deepens, Cleopatra returns to the inner palace. The halls remain cool, kept so by thick walls and carefully angled windows. She moves toward the library. Not the great library of Alexandria, whose scrolls number in the tens of thousands, but her own private chamber of knowledge. Here, she keeps her personal collection. Writings from scholars she admires, texts on astronomy and medicine, and maps of the stars traced in ink and crushed sapphire. She selects a scroll on lunar rhythms and sits cross-legged on a mat of papyrus, woven thick. Her fingers trace constellations as if they were melodies. The phases of the moon speak to her, not in prophecy, but in poetry. The ancients knew much, and she finds comfort in their symmetry. A small brazier burns quietly in the maish corner. Its smoke curls toward the ceiling like the tail of a dreaming cat. The only sound now is the occasional flick of parchment or the subtle shift of a breeze through the open corridor. Cleopatra reads for an hour, then another, then stops, not at the end of the scroll, but at a moment that feels complete. Evening. Approaches dawn. The sun begins to dip low beyond the harbor, drawing long shadows across the gleaming marble of Alexandria. From her private chambers, Cleopatra watches the transformation with quiet reverence. The city changes color as the day slips away. The domes of temples turn from gold to rose. The white walls of noble houses blush with the warmth of evening. And the great Pharos lighthouse throws its long reflection across the waters like a whispered promise to distant travelers. The sea becomes a sheet of copper and blue, glittering like a mosaic stirred by breath. Inside, candles are lit not all at once, but gradually, by hand, one by one, each tiny flame dancing to life from the tip of a reed held over the last. The scent of beeswax mingles with myrrh and sandalwood. Servants move like mist, their silhouettes soft in the lamplight. There is no call for noise, no command that pierces the stillness. Everything flows, every act part of the quiet rhythm Cleopatra has shaped around her, a living fabric of patience and grace. She reclines upon a low divan near her garden's colonnade, now shaded in twilight. The air is gentle here, the stones still warm from the sun. A cat wanders past her feet, pausing to stretch before curling upon a cushion not far from her hand. She lets her fingers drift toward its fur, stroking it softly without looking, her gaze still fixed on the horizon, where the sun's final edge sinks behind the curve of the city. A servant brings a shallow bowl filled with cool water and slices of lemon. Cleopatra dips her fingers into it, savoring the sharp scent, and then touches her temples, a simple gesture to cool the heat of the day. Beside her rests a clay plate of dried apricots, almonds, and honey lotus seeds. She eats, slowly, more for pleasure than hunger. A breeze rustles through the papyrus reeds lining the courtyard. It brings with it the sound of distant voices, faint laughter from somewhere in the lower halls, the slow rhythm of sandals on stone, the soft call of a flute played somewhere out of sight. Alexandria lives on, but Cleopatra exists in a quieter chamber of the world. As dusk settles, the astronomer is summoned. He arrives without fanfare, bearing a scroll wrapped in linen and a polished bronze disc etched with the movements of celestial bodies. He is old, with eyes clouded not by blindness, but by the weight of long memory. Cleopatra welcomes him with a smile, and he unrolls the scroll upon a low table beside her. Together, they lean over the parchment, speaking not in rushed tones, but in soft exchanges. They discuss the stars not as omens, but as friends, steady companions in the sky who drift above kings and commoners alike. He tells her that Venus is bright tonight, rising early, bold against the indigo sky. She lifts her eyes and sees it. Not a prophecy, but a point of beauty. They fall silent again, letting the stars speak in their own way. Later, as darkness deepens and the constellations grow brighter, Cleopatra retires to her chamber. But this is no retreat. It is a return to softness, to stillness, to the slow quiet she keeps, like a secret at the center of her life. Her bathing pool has been prepared. The chamber glows with low light from wall sconces. The water is scented with blue lotus and warm to the temperature of the Nile in summer. She steps into it with a sigh, not of weariness, but of release. The oils cling to her skin, the water embracing her like memory. She closes her eyes. The sound of the world becomes distant, filtered. Through the water's hush, time slips again. Afterward, she is wrapped in a fine robe, not royal regalia, but something simpler. The sort of garment worn in private, among trusted attendants, and woven from the cotton fields along the Nile. Her hair, damp and fragrant, is combed with wide-toothed ivory. A few strands are braided loosely and left to rest along her shoulder. Walks alone to the upper chamber, where no one follows. Here, the room is lined with soft cushions, deep pillows, and the scent of cedarwood lingers in the rafters. From the open shutters, the stars are visible, scattered like coins across the velvet dome of the sky. She lies down on a low couch, hands folded across her abdomen, breathing slow, steady. A servant, silent and practiced, enters only to place a scroll beside her. It is not a speech, not a treaty, not a letter from Rome. It is a story, one she has read before, a tale of the gods, of Osiris and Isis, of the cycle of birth and return. Her fingers brush the edges of the parchment, and she does not open it yet. She simply holds it, the weight of it familiar. Outside, the city has quieted. harbor no longer shouts with the voices of traders. The streets wind into darkness, lit only by torchlight and the occasional gleam of oil lamps. Alexandria sleeps, and in its dreaming, the queen becomes once more a woman, not a figure of legend, but a soul adrift on the soft waters of time. She reads a few lines slowly, then closes her eyes. She does not need to finish the tale. She knows how it ends, and how it begins again. Her breathing slows, the stars turn overhead, and the night, ancient and eternal, folds her gently into its arms. Outside the palace, the moon rises slowly above the rooftops of Alexandria, its pale light washing the city in silver silence. The sea, once glimmering in gold, now glows faintly like polished stone, each wave folding into the next in slow procession. Lamps flicker in distant towers. Columns cast long shadows over garden paths. The city that once bustled now breathes. Softly, its pulse slowed by darkness and sleep. Within her chamber, Cleopatra remains still, not yet asleep, but not entirely awake. That her couch is low and wide, layered in linen and cushions dyed in muted colors: ochre, pale blue, sand. A soft breeze moves through the shutters, stirring the edge of her robe and the delicate fringe of a wall hanging nearby. Incense, now burned down to a faint coil, lingers in the air like the memory of a song. She lies with one arm across her chest, her breathing long, smooth, and measured. Beneath her fingers rests the scroll she did not finish. It does not matter. The words, once spoken by priests and elders in temples, long since claimed by ivy and time, are known to her by heart. They are part of her, like the river, the stars, the breath of stone after rain. She does not need to read them to feel their rhythm not far below. In the lowest courts of the palace, guards pace slowly. Their sandals whisper against the flagstones. Their armor creaks gently with each movement. They do not speak. Their task is not to defend, but to preserve the stillness. They keep the night whole. Their presence is like a lullaby for the walls themselves. In the kitchens, the fires have gone cold. Clay pots rest, cleaned and dry. Bread dough for the morning sits beneath a cloth, rising slowly in its sleep. In a far corridor, a musician too restless to retire plays a slow melody on a stringed instrument, its tune faint, barely audible beyond the nearest pillar. The note lingers in the air, then vanishes like smoke. Cleopatra listens. Though she lies with her eyes closed, her senses are awake in quiet communion. She feels the weight of the air, the shift of the night. She senses the slow turning of the heavens above her. She hears the hush between the stars. A servant enters only to adjust a linen screen, ensuring the moonlight falls gently across the room. He bows and withdraws without a word. His presence leaves behind a calm ripple, like the breath of a temple after prayer. Now the queen sleeps, not all at once, not with finality, but in layers, like a tide receding slowly from the shore. Her thoughts quiet, her limbs soften, her mouth slackens into a slight smile. The long journey of her day dissolves into the hush of midnight. There are no dreams, not yet, only stillness, only breath. The palace, too, Sleep's dark walls remember the sound of voices now silent. Courtyards hold the scent of the day. Pools reflect nothing now but darkness and the faint outline of reeds swaying gently in the wind. Somewhere in the upper library, a scroll lies half unrolled beside a low lamp, its flame nearly gone. Time bends, hours pass, and still the queen lies in peace, wrapped not in the gold of ceremony, but in the softness of linen, the hush of ancient air, and the arms of the night. Somewhere far off, not yet within the palace walls, a rooster calls into the darkness, a single quiet crow that does not break the silence, but rather becomes a part of it. It is not yet morning, but the idea of morning has begun. The deep night, so thick and dreamlike only an hour before, begins to stretch at the edges. Darkness lifts ever so slightly from the tops of the palm trees, from the silver dome of the observatory, from the lintels of the colonnaded walkways, where dew has begun to settle in fine, silvery drops. The queen, still wrapped in sleep, lies, with one hand upon her chest and the other resting beside her. Her breath is slow and even, and her face, soft and at peace, is illuminated by the faintest wash of blue-gray light from the open shutters. The breeze carries a hint of moisture, the distant murmur of waves against the shore, and the scent of early morning fig leaves just beginning to warm beneath the returning sky. A gentle knock at the chamber door does not sound, but rather glides. A barely audible tap, the quiet signal of her oldest attendant, arriving not to wake her, but to wait for the right moment. The servants of Cleopatra have long since mastered the art of presence without disturbance. They do not mark the beginning of her day with voice or light, but with the slow rhythm of preparation, the laying out of water warmed with herbs, the folding of fresh linen garments, the gentle grinding of frankincense in small stone bowls. Within the queen's private garden, the lotus flowers begin to open, one by one. Their petals unfold slowly, each like a whispered breath, releasing a fragrance that mingles with the earth and the dew and the breath of the Nile. A small fountain gurgles, its song unchanged for centuries, spilling into a shallow basin surrounded by lily and reeds. Two ibises wander past the edge of the water, their long legs graceful, their heads tilted with quiet curiosity. Back within the chamber, Cleopatra stirs, not abruptly, not with surprise or effort, but with the natural ease of someone whose body and the earth's turning sky move in quiet agreement. Her eyelids flutter open. Her gaze is unfocused at first, then calm. She lies still, taking in the silence, the softness, the smell of warmed oil and fresh linen drifting from the inner hall. There is no need to speak, Doc. She knows what time it is. Not by sun or hourglass, but by how the breeze feels on her cheek, by the texture of the air in her lungs, by the deep, humming memory in her bones. It is almost morning, and she is ready for it. The same attendant enters, kneels, and waits. Cleopatra rises, slowly, with a grace that belongs not to performance, but to memory, a life lived in long, careful movements. Her feet touch the floor, cool marble, smooth and silent. She wraps a loose robe about her shoulders and steps through the curtain toward the bath chamber. The water awaits her, clear and scented with blue lotus and dried rose petals. She lowers herself into it with a breath, closing her eyes as warmth envelopes her. The stone basin is shallow and wide, the edge cool beneath her fingers. Two women enter and kneel beside the pool, pouring water gently over her arms, her back, her hair. No voices are exchanged. This is a ritual older than language. Steam curls softly upward, disappearing into the high ceiling, while birds begin to stir beyond the walls. The queen remains in the water until the light shifts from silver to pale gold. The day at last has arrived, wrapped in fresh linen, her damp hair braided and resting softly against her back. Cleopatra walks barefoot through the shaded hallways of the upper palace. The floor beneath her feet is smooth, the color of warm sand, patterned in mosaics that trace the myths of her ancestors. Isis giving life to Osiris, Horus watching with his falcon eyes, Mac balancing the feather of truth. But Cleopatra does not pause to read these images. She has known them since she was a child. They do not teach, they simply accompany, quiet and eternal. A tray of breakfast awaits her in a quiet alcove beside the open-air corridor, a space shaded by carved columns and overlooking the lower gardens, where the dew is now fading into the soil. The food is simple, prepared precisely to her liking. Soft flatbread, slices of fresh fig, a bowl of barley sweetened with honey and cinnamon, goat's milk, and dates wrapped around almonds. No feast, no crowd, just nourishment, taken in silence, as the warm breeze stirs the edges of her robe. She eats slowly, without distraction, not because there is no urgency, but because she chooses none. The day may contain embassies or philosophers, priests or letters from Rome, but now she focuses only on the softness of the bread between her fingers, a taste of the fig's ripened center, the cool, slightly bitter edge of the goat's milk. A white cat sits quietly nearby, tail curled around its paws, eyes blinking slowly at the queen. It makes no sound, only watches. Cleopatra meets its gaze and smiles faintly. When she finishes her meal, she remains seated, elbows on the table, chin resting lightly upon her fingers. Below her, the gardens have filled with quiet movement, the gentle labor of the palace staff, the rustle of leaves being swept from paths, the faint creak of irrigation tools. Farther off, down the slope toward the harbor, the sound of carts and sailors grows slowly, but never intrudes. The palace sits above it all, like a shell upon a wave, present, but calm. A servant appears with a scroll, the day's correspondence. Is light, a letter from a landowner in Thebes, reporting the success of a new irrigation project. Another from the priesthood at Karnak, requesting ceremonial approval for an upcoming festival. Cleopatra takes them, but does not unroll them immediately. She holds them in her hands as she would hold a sleeping bird, gently, without grasping. The queen rises again and begins her slow walk through the inner courts. Each corridor is familiar. Each wall, each statue, each flowering urn set beneath an archway has been chosen by her or those before her. She walks not as a ruler inspecting her dominion, but as a soul moving through the pages of her own quiet story. In the courtyard of the papyrus grove, she stops. There is water here, a long, shallow pool lined with blue-painted tiles, its surface scattered with fallen petals. Two young scribes sit on low stools at its edge, copying scrolls under the guidance of a master seated slightly above them. They do not see her at first. She watches them work, the way their brushes move, the careful balance of papyrus sheets weighed down with small stones to prevent the wind from lifting them. When the master notices her, he stands and bows low, motioning to the others, who freeze in reverence. But Cleopatra raises a hand and gestures for them to continue. She says nothing. She does not need to. She remains a moment longer, then turns and disappears beneath the shade of the acacia trees lining the outer wall. Bees hum near the blossoms. The breeze carries a faint trace of mint and citrus dot, and the day moves forward, still slow, still wide. The palace grows warmer as midday approaches, though its thick walls and shaded walkways keep the air cool within. A fine white curtain dances at the entrance to the chamber where Cleopatra now reclines, a space open to the gardens, but protected from the harshness of the sun. Here, the light does not intrude. It glows, softened by latticework and the long fingers of swaying trees outside. Two visitors are announced. There is no procession, no trumpets, no ringing of staff upon stone. Only the quiet voice of an attendant and a nod from the queen. She does not rise. She does not need to. Instead, she adjusts her posture slightly and waits, her hand resting upon the arm of her low chair, carved inlaid wood smooth beneath her. Fingers dot the guests enter slowly. One is a priest of Thoth, a man with calm eyes, carrying a roll of parchment beneath his arm. The other, a philosopher from Cyrene, whose hair is flecked with gray and whose robes are simply tied at the waist. They bow low and respectful, and are invited to sit upon cushions before her. The conversation is not urgent. They speak of the Nile's rhythm this season, of the position of Jupiter in the evening sky, of a rare bird recently seen near the Fayum, marshes, and of a theory from the Greek schools about the nature of silence in the soul. Cleopatra listens more than she speaks, though when she does speak, it is measured, thoughtful, her voice low and fluid, like oil poured into cool water. She does not need to prove her wisdom. She simply wears it at one point. The philosopher pauses to compliment the stillness of the room, to marvel at how the sound of the city seems to stop just at the edge of her walls. She smiles, faintly. Stillness, she says, is a form of power, one that waits instead of reaching. The priest nods in approval. They continue speaking for a while longer. A dish of cool pomegranate juice is brought, poured from a vessel carved from translucent alabaster. No one drinks in haste. Time in this chamber is slow, round, without corners. Eventually, the guests take their leave, bowing again, walking backward until they are out of view. No words of farewell are necessary. The silence they shared has said all that needed to be said. The queen remains seated. For a long moment, she watches the curtain sway. Her fingers move slightly, brushing invisible patterns upon the wood of the armrest. She does not summon anyone. She does not rise. She simply breathes, and all around her, the palace breathes with her. The hours move gently, as if time itself has adopted the queen's pace. Dot in the open garden court. Long shafts of sunlight stretch across the stone path, like golden threads pulled from the loom of Ara himself. The sound of birds is softer now, less the call of morning joy, and more the slow conversation of wings at rest. Trees rustle quietly, not from wind, but from the soft landing of doves returning to their branches. Cleopatra walks alone now. Her steps are measured, her sandals thin and flexible, allowing her to feel the faint warmth left in the stones beneath her. A slight breeze lifts the hem of her robe, sending it swaying like a banner of peace. She carries no scepter, no staff, no scroll. Her hands are empty. Her mind, too, is lighter in this hour. She walks not as a ruler inspecting her domain, but as a woman remembering the spaces she loves. The corner where the papyrus grows thickest, the spot by the pool where the lily bloomed first in spring, the path where her favorite cat once liked to follow. Her presence in the garden is not a ceremony. It is a return. A bench, shaded by a lattice canopy woven with flowering vines, offers her rest. She lowers herself onto it slowly, her robe settling around her like folded silk. The bench is worn smooth from many afternoons like this. Afternoon. Light filters through the greenery above, speckling her skin with soft gold. She leans back, closes her eyes, and lets the warmth of the day settle over her like a blanket. No one speaks to her, no one follows her. Even her attendants, so attuned to her rhythms, have learned to leave this hour untouched. She listens instead to the bees among the herbs, to the faint splash of water from the garden's fountain, to her own breath moving gently in and out, slower than the Nile, older than the wind. The weight of crowns and treaties, the weight of Rome and lineage, even the weight of her own name. All of it is lighter now, not gone, but softened after some time. Minutes, hours. It's unclear. A young servant girl approaches, barefoot, carrying a small clay cup. She offers it silently, and Cleopatra opens her eyes just enough to accept it with a slight nod. It is a simple tea, mint and lemon balm, steeped in hot water, cooled to perfect warmth. She sips it slowly, feeling it spread through her chest like a hush above her. Through the leaves, the sky is beginning to tilt toward amber. It is not evening yet, but it is no longer afternoon. And Cleopatra knows this without clocks, without declarations. Just by the way, the shadows have changed direction. By the way, the air feels slightly cooler on her arms. By the stillness deepening in the garden's corners. She does not rise yet. There is no need. The world will wait. Eventually, as the last warmth of the afternoon fades from the stones, Cleopatra stands not with haste, but as if drawn upward by the soft tug of evening itself. Her robe rustles faintly as she moves, catching the waning sunlight in folds of pale linen and shadow. She sets the empty clay cup gently upon the bench beside her and begins her walk back through the garden path. Slower now, as if savoring the final footsteps of the day. The garden has changed. The light is lower, more golden than white. Flowers, once spread wide in the morning sun, now begin to close, folding inward like dreams waiting for nightfall. The air carries a new scent, jasmine, cool stone, and the distant smoke of evening fires being kindled in the kitchens below. Somewhere in the trees, the birds have gone quiet, their silhouettes now perched, heads tucked beneath wings. She re-enters the palace not with ceremony, but as a breeze enters a room, calm, gentle, unnoticed by most. Inside, the walls seem to glow from within. The sun has retreated, but the marble, still warm from its touch, radiates a kind of memory. Torches are being lit in the long halls, each one flickering to life with a quiet hiss, their flames mirrored on the polished floors. Servants move quietly, preparing the evening spaces not with noise, but with reverence. In her dressing chamber, 2 women await. They greet her with silent bows and prepare her for the final hours of the day, not with grand adornments or ceremony, but with comfort. Her robes are changed for lighter fabrics. Her hair, now dry and softly curled from the sun, is rebraided into loose, elegant twists that fall gracefully over her shoulders. She chooses no crown, no formal jewelry, only a simple necklace of lapis and gold, the kind her mother once wore in quieter moments. Then she walks slowly, thoughtfully, toward the terrace that overlooks the sea. It is her favorite place at this hour, not because of the view alone, but because of the way the world becomes still here. The harbor, once noisy with traders and sailors, now lies calm and reflective. The water catches the colors of the sky, pale lavender, faint rose, deepening blue. Ships bob gently in the fading light. Lanterns glow on their decks, like fireflies anchored in place. Cleopatra stands, with her hands resting lightly on the carved stone balustrade. She closes her eyes and listens, not for anything, but to everything. The low thrum of distant drums, the cry of a gull wheeling overhead, the clink of pottery from a courtyard below, the world unwinding. She remains there for a long while, doing nothing, being everything. And when the stars begin to show, first one, then another, and then a soft scattering like spilled salt across velvet, she smiles softly. The same stars she studied as a girl, the same stars above Egypt, above Rome, above every field and fire. The sky does not know kings or queens, only light. The evening meal is not a feast. It is served in a quiet room with just 2 attendants. A selection of olives, lentils with coriander, soft cheese, grapes, and a small loaf of warm bread. She eats with her fingers, slowly, without distraction. A cup of pomegranate wine rests beside her, untouched until the meal is nearly finished. There is no speech, no discussion of politics, only the murmur of the fountain nearby and the occasional distant voice carried by the wind from the lower quarters. When she finishes, she leans back and breathes deeply. Not a sigh, not weariness, just presence. The sky outside has turned the color of deep ink, washed with starlight, and the faint outline of clouds drifting like whispers across the heavens. From her private quarters, Cleopatra watches the constellations emerge one by one, old companions, familiar and steady, etched across the firmament with care. The palace is nearly silent now. Only a few torches remain lit along the longest corridors, their light flickering in orange pools upon the cool stone. Most servants have retired to their resting chambers. The courtyards lie empty, their fountains whispering to no one. The harbor below is hushed. Only the creak of mooring ropes and the distant lap of waves against the docks remains. Cleopatra turns from the window and walks slowly through the hall that leads to her inner sanctum. Her footsteps make no sound on the woven reed mats that line the floor. Along the wall, the shadows of painted murals flicker in the low light. Scenes of the Nile's bounty, of Horus and Hathor, of queens long gone surrounded by lotuses and crocodiles, music and perfume. The images shift gently with each movement of the torchlight, giving the illusion that the past is breathing softly just beyond the veil of the present. She pauses at a shallow alcove, a shrine carved into the wall. Here stands a small statue of Isis, her arms outstretched, her headdress crowned with the moon. A shallow dish of incense smolders before her. Cleopatra bows her head and whispers a few words, not as a ruler to a god, but as a daughter to a mother. The smoke curls upward, warm and fragrant, before vanishing into the stillness. Her bedchamber is dim, lit by 2 lamps, one at the threshold, the other near the sleeping couch. The bed itself is wide and low, layered in linen sheets dyed soft, hues of sand and blue. Cushions, filled with goose down and wrapped in silk, are arranged carefully. At the foot of the bed, a folded shawl rests, embroidered with patterns that mimic the shape of river currents, and the eye of Rada Cleopatra approaches. A low table, where a scroll lies half unrolled. It is not statcraft or record. It is poetry. Lines written by Sappho, carried across the sea by a merchant who admired the queen's taste for the gentle. She picks it up, reads a single stanza aloud, then places it aside. Instead of reading more, she steps toward the basin nearby, where a servant has prepared a final rinse of rose water and balm. She cleanses her hands and face slowly, the warm water soothing, the scents familiar. A silk cloth is passed across her skin with the practiced movements of ritual. When she finishes, she extinguishes the flame of the second lamp with a small gesture. A slow exhale into the darkness. The room glows only faintly now, from the doorway's flame and from the soft gleam of starlight. Filtering through the sheer drape's dot, she lies down, one leg drawn slightly over the other, her arm resting on her waist, her face turned toward the open balcony. She does not pull the covers. Around her, the night is warm, and the silence is blanket enough. Her eyes remain open for a long while. She watches the stars, not for answers, not for power, only because they are. Beautiful. And in this moment, as her breath slows, Cleopatra is not queen, nor symbol, nor mystery. She is simply a woman, alone with the hush of the night and the rhythm of her own heart. The sounds of the world have vanished into the quiet folds of the city's sleep, and only the sea, the stars, and the memory of her day remain. The room is still. Beyond the balcony, the sea breathes slowly, its surface glinting under the starlight like hammered silver. The sails of moored ships sway faintly, their ropes creaking in rhythm with the tide. But within the queen's chamber there is only silence, no footsteps, no murmur, no wind. Even the flame at the door is dimmed to a quiet, pulsing glow. More ember than fire, Cleopatra sleeps. Her body lies in perfect ease, the linen of her bed gently rising and falling with each breath. Her features are soft, peaceful, untouched by thought or tension. The lines of her face, so often watched and studied by senators, scholars, and scribes, now hold only serenity, the expression of one who has surrendered completely to rest, knowing the world will continue without her hand. Her hair, loosened from its braids, spills like black silk across the pillow. A strand rests across her cheek, UNMOVING. Outside. A faint breeze stirs the drapes, but it does not reach her. She is wrapped in stillness, the ancient kind, the temple kind, the kind that once lived beneath the pyramids when the gods themselves were young. Elsewhere in the palace, torches have been extinguished. Guards lean against cold stone, blinking. Slowly, their thoughts drifting like leaves in a river. In the kitchens, clay pots rest beneath woven cloth, the bread of tomorrow rising in silent promise. In the garden, lotus petals have folded in, cradling dew at their centers like secret offerings to the moon. Even the cats are still, curled on thresholds and cushions, their tails wrapped around their bodies, ears twitching at sounds that never arrive. Time flows here, not in moments, but in tides. The stars above turn imperceptibly, slow as breath. The moonlight has shifted, now touching only the edge of Cleopatra's foot. It glows faintly against her skin, pale and ancient, casting no shadow. She does not stir. Her dreams, if she dreams, are silent. They leave no trace upon her brow. And so the night deepens. No one comes. No one leaves. The world holds its breath. And the queen, the last pharaoh of Egypt, sleeps beneath the stars, not as a figure of legend, not as a ruler of empires, but as a soul resting in the cradle of time, her body wrapped in linen, her thoughts quiet, her heart calm. The hour is long, the sky is dark, and everything is exactly as it should be. The stars, having watched in silence through the long night, begin to pale in the eastern sky. It is not yet morning, not fully, but something has changed. In the air, a soft turning, like the shifting of silk across bare skin, so subtle that only those who live close to the rhythms of earth and sky would feel it. The stillness of the palace is complete, but the darkness is no longer infinite. A suggestion of light teases the edge of the horizon. In her chamber, Cleopatra stirs, not from noise, for there is none, not from urgency, for there is none, but from the quiet pull of time itself, as though her body, attuned to the movement of sun and moon, knows that the long sleep is nearing its natural end. Her breath deepens, then rises slightly. Her fingers flex just once. The soft linen around her shifts. She does not yet open her eyes. The world is not ready. Outside the window, the silhouettes of date palms begin to return. The sea is no longer silver, but steel blue, calm and flat as a mirror. Birds begin to move. Within the trees, hopping from branch to branch with soft rustles. One calls out, a long, low note that fades into the stillness, like incense into air. Within the palace, lamps are rekindled, not many, just enough to guide the earliest attendants. Through the shadowed halls, the click of ceramic bowls, the hush of sandals on smooth stone, the soft opening of cedarwood shutters. These are the sounds that gently announce the arrival of day in Cleopatra's court. A servant approaches her door, kneels and waits. Cleopatra senses it. She breathes once more, slowly, fully, and opens her eyes. Light does not flood the room. It brushes it, gently, as if hesitant to interrupt the final minutes of night's embrace. The queen turns her head toward the open shutters. The breeze that enters is cool, touched by the water. It carries with it the scent of mint, myrrh, and the faintest trace of fresh-baked bread from the lower kitchens. She rises without rush. Her movements are fluid, practiced, like a ritual she has performed 1,000 times. Her feet touch the mat beneath her bed. Her hands fold the linen shawl. She walks without speaking to the basin where rose water waits. The servant, still kneeling, places a towel beside the bowl and then withdraws without rising. The queen washes her face with cupped hands, patting her cheeks, temples, and neck with water that is neither warm nor cold, but perfectly balanced. She breathes deeply. The scent of the petals calms her. The coolness awakens her. This is not the beginning of a new day. It is the continuation of a single, endless rhythm. One long breath drawn across the ages. She steps into the outer chamber. Light has grown stronger now. Gold peaks across the sky. The columns in the courtyard are awash in soft amber. The statues of the gods cast long shadows across the paving stones. A young girl kneels in the far corner, arranging lotus petals into the reflecting pool. Not for beauty alone, but because the queen prefers them there. In the morning. Cleopatra watches her for a moment, then walks toward the east-facing terrace. There, she stands alone. Beneath her, the city of Alexandria yawns to life, not loudly, but gradually. Roofs begin to glow. Windows open. Distant carts creak along the morning streets. Smoke rises from ovens. A dog barks once, then falls silent. Above it all, the great lighthouse stands like a sentinel of dreams, catching the first rays of sun across its white stone. Cleopatra closes her eyes. She listens. The sound of the waves, the birds in flight, the slow, steady rhythm of breath moving. Through ancient air. This is her Egypt. Not the banners, not the coins, not the scrolls sealed with wax and carried to Rome. This. The breath between night and day. The hush before the city awakens. The sacred silence that lives not in temples, but in the heartbeat of morning. Cleopatra remains on the terrace for a while longer, her gaze resting not on any single object, but on the feeling of the morning itself. The city hums below, quiet and waking. The sea reflects a sky that now glows with warm gold, a soft burnishing that glides across waves and rooftops, casting light upon domes, statues, birds in flight. Behind her, the palace stirs, but she does. not yet return. This is a sacred moment, not governed by the clock or by ceremony, but by something older, something felt in the bones and remembered across lifetimes. She inhales deeply. The scent of salt air mixes with fresh fig leaves and jasmine vines. Still cool with dew, her shoulders lift slightly, then drop in a long, easy exhale. Another day has begun not with fanfare, but with presence. Eventually, she returns to her inner chambers, where the morning routine awaits. Attendants move gently through the space, preparing bowls of fresh water, folding garments woven from soft, hand-dyed linens, laying out small clay jars of perfumed oils. Cleopatra enters silently, and they greet her with quiet bows. There is no chatter, no rush. The rhythm is familiar, every movement part of a long-established dance. She stands as one attendant gently pours water over her hands, then over her feet, letting the warmth soothe and wake. Another brushes a mixture of crushed herbs and finely ground salt against her skin, a gentle exfoliation that leaves her feeling renewed, not merely cleaned. A third smooths oil on her arms and back, massaging in small, circular motions that relax the muscles and quiet the mind. Each touch is careful, reverent. Not because she is queen, but because this is a ritual of respect, of presence, of care. Her clothing for the day is not chosen for power, but for comfort and ease. A flowing robe of pale ivory with a light blue sash. Sandals with soft leather. Straps. A single ring lapis lazuli set in gold, its surface polished smooth by time. Her hair is brushed and gathered into a long, low braid, with thin ribbons of linen woven through. No crown, no dramatic eye paint, just softness, just the woman. She steps into the hall as sunlight streams through the eastern windows, pooling in long golden rectangles upon the cool stone floor. She walks slowly, letting her eyes pass across the murals that line the corridor. Not to study them, but to greet them, like old friends seen anew each day. The gods of Egypt, painted in ochre and jade, gold and black, look back at her with calm expressions. Thoth with his ibis head, writing upon a scroll, Bastet with her feline grace, Anubis watching over a sleeping soul. These images do not intimidate, they soothe. They belong to her, and she to them dot at the far end of the hall. A servant waits with a scroll dot. It is not a matter of state, but a letter from a scholar in Memphis, reporting on the construction of a new observatory. Cleopatra receives it with a nod and holds it in both hands, walking slowly into the colonnade where vines grow up the fluted pillars and the air smells of warm stone and citrus. She finds a bench in the shade, sits and unrolls the parchment. Script is careful, deliberate. The scholar describes the alignment of stones with the rising of Sirius, the sacred star of the Nile flood. He notes the movement of this shadow across the courtyard at noon. He includes a poem, simple and graceful, about the turning of the heavens and the patience of time. Cleopatra reads it all, slowly, then rolls the scroll again and places it beside. Her dot she does not speak. She simply sits. The sun moves across the floor. A breeze stirs the curtain, and the Queen of Egypt, listens to the world. Below, in the central courtyard, the preparations for midday are beginning. Large clay jars are lifted into position near the kitchens. Baskets of dates, lentils, and cucumbers are carried through shaded corridors. Musicians begin to gather near the garden, tuning their instruments not with scales or sound, but with feeling. They pluck the strings gently, softly, adjusting by instinct rather than formula. Their music will not be loud. It will not be a performance. It will simply exist, like sunlight, like breath. Cleopatra joins them when she is ready. She steps into the garden, where cushions have been placed beneath the sycamore trees, the shade offering a coolness that mingles with the floral scent of blossoming vines. The musicians sit in a semicircle, young, focused, their eyes calm. They do not play yet. They wait for her to sit, which she does, lowering herself onto a wide pillow, her robe flowing gently around her. The music begins. Soft, circular, repeating. It has no beginning and no end. It winds around itself like the Nile winds through the desert, not to reach a goal, but to be itself. A reed flute joins the strings, its notes high and wandering, like a bird testing the currents above the river. Cleopatra closes her eyes. She does not think of Rome. She does not think of ships or taxes or speeches. She thinks of the music, of the sound of one note becoming another, of the space between. This is her power. Not conquest, not fear. Stillness. Presence so deep that it silences the noise around it. A cup of water is offered, cool, fresh, touched with mint. She drinks it slowly, one sip at a time, the cup heavy in her hand, grounding her in the present. The music continues drifting. Birds call to each other above. Somewhere, water trickles from a small stone spout into a hidden basin. The earth smells warm, alive. A bee hovers near a flowering vine, then drifts away again. The queen breathes. The queen is still. Eventually, the music fades, not with a final note, but like fog lifting from a river. The musicians set down their instruments and bow their heads. Cleopatra opens her eyes and nods gently, her gaze full of quiet gratitude. No words are exchanged, none are needed. Everyone disperses without hurry, their movements as soft as silk. She remains seated. The sun has passed its peak now. Begin to lengthen. The day turns toward its golden side. And still, Cleopatra sits, her hands resting in her lap, her eyes half closed, her breath like the tide, in and out and in again. She does not move to prepare for the evening. Not yet. She waits. She listens. The world is still speaking. And so the day continues its gentle turning. Cleopatra rises from the garden in her own time, without a signal or word. The sun has mellowed now, bathing the courtyard in a rich amber hue, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the flagstones. A servant meets her at the entrance with a folded linen wrap, soft, lightly scented with lavender, which she accepts with a slight nod. She does not wrap it tightly. She drapes it loosely over her shoulders, letting the edges float behind. Her she moves once more through the quiet palace corridors. In the upper library, the scent of parchment and cedar fills the air. Scrolls rest in rows along the walls, labeled in the delicate Greek hand of the court scribes. The light here is filtered through latticed windows, tracing gentle patterns across the tiled floor. Cleopatra pauses near a scroll stand and selects one she knows well, a treatise on healing herbs written by an Egyptian priest centuries ago. She does not sit to study it. She simply opens the scroll halfway, traces the columns with her eyes, and replaces it without a sound. It is enough to see the words. To remember the knowledge they carry. She moves on down a quiet passage that winds toward the observatory. Here the air is cooler, more still. The high dome above the chamber is open to the sky, a round mouth through which the heavens speak. A polished bronze armillary sphere rests at the center of the room, its rings glinting in the sun's last light. Cleopatra walks around it once, her fingers trailing lightly along its surface, remembering nights spent here with the astronomers, charting stars, naming the unknown. She leaves the observatory and returns to her private chambers. Evening is now fully upon the city. Torches are lit once more along the corridors, casting flickering shadows that dance up the columns and across the painted ceilings. Music drifts faintly from another part of the palace, lyres and tambourines, soft laughter, the sound of sandals against stone. But Cleopatra walks in silence, undisturbed. In her chambers. The preparations for the evening meal are nearly complete. A low table is set near the balcony, where the breeze can cool the air. A table holds a modest spread, bowls of lentils, seasoned with cumin and coriander, steamed barley with pomegranate seeds, cucumbers in vinegar, and small honey cakes wrapped in fig leaves. A cup of wine, deep red, poured only halfway, sits beside a small clay lamp that glows gently in the gathering dark. She eats alone. There is no audience, no ceremony. She selects her food slowly, tasting each bite, pausing often to listen to the wind outside, to watch the flickering of the lamp flame. She finishes her meal without haste, and when she's done, she places her fingers lightly against the rim of her wine cup and breathes in the scent before taking a single sip. Then she rises. The balcony calls to her again. The view has changed. The sea is now dark and quiet, mirroring the stars above. The lighthouse gleams in the distance, its flames steady. Below, the city hums with the quiet rituals of night. Families gathering on rooftops, vendors covering stalls, candles flickering. In upper windows, there is a hush over Alexandria, the kind that lives only in places where ancient stone meets living water. Cleopatra rests her hands on the cool marble rail. She does not think about tomorrow. She does not plan. She only watches. The stars above seem to pulse with quiet life. They do not belong to Rome. They do not belong to kings. They simply are. She remains there, still, until the wind grows cooler and the city falls into full slumber. Then she turns and re-enters the chamber. Her servants have already drawn the linens, laid the cushions, prepared the room for rest. No words are exchanged, only glances, only the graceful passing of cloth and gesture. She undresses in silence, Her garments are folded neatly and placed aside. Her hair is unbraided, her skin wiped gently with rose water. A final oil, sandalwood and myrrh, is pressed into her temples, and then she is left alone. The room dims. Only the stars remain, seen faintly through the draped balcony. Cleopatra lies down. The bed is cool and soft. The sheets settle around her like the arms of memory. She closes her eyes. Her breath slows. Her hands rest gently against her abdomen. And sleep returns, not as a stranger, but as a companion. And so ends the day. And so the night begins again. The queen sleeps. The palace sleeps. The sea and the stars hold them in silence. The first light of dawn returns without announcement. There is no trumpet, no clang of doors. Only a soft graying of the eastern sky, a barely there hue that slips through the delicate latticework above Cleopatra's chamber. The breeze has cooled in the night, and it now moves gently through the room, lifting the edges of linen curtains, stirring the thin fringe of her shawl that rests across the foot of the bed. She does not wake abruptly. Her breath deepens first, and her fingers shift. Her body, still wrapped in the calm of dreams, stretches ever so slightly, as though the soul within her is listening to the world before returning fully. Her eyes remain closed, but she knows morning is here, not because of any sound, not because of duty, but because she feels the light on her skin before she sees it. A servant outside her chamber kneels, waiting. There is no knock, no voice. After a moment, Cleopatra stirs. She sits upright in silence, drawing the shawl across her shoulders, grounding herself in the feel of fabric, of air, of stillness. Her hair, slightly tousled, falls loosely down her back. She rises and walks barefoot to the basin of rose water, dipping her hands into its coolness, patting her cheeks, the back of her neck, her collarbone. She exhales slowly, her breath warm against the morning air. The world beyond her balcony has changed. The harbor stirs again. The sails of ships rise like white wings catching first light. Merchants roll back the coverings from their stalls. The calls of gulls ring out, softened by the hum of city life returning. Across the distant rooftops, small cooking fires send their pale smoke into the brightening sky. In the palace, routines begin once more. Clay jars are lifted and carried. Loaves are placed into ovens. Gardens are swept clean of fallen leaves. The air fills with scent of crushed herbs, of wheat baking, of incense drifting through carved doorways. The queen steps into this rhythm, not as a conductor, but as one who knows every note by heart. She eats simply. Flatbread, soft goat cheese, a cluster of green grapes just beginning to ripen, and a cup of warm barley milk. She dines alone, seated on a low couch near the open window, where light pours over the marble floor in wide ribbons. Her mind does not yet race. Her thoughts remain like the sea beyond the lighthouse, still, wide, slow-moving. Later, she walks. The eastern corridor, where the walls are painted in scenes of the Nile cycle, sowing, flooding, harvest, rest. She pauses by a panel where farmers bend to place seeds in the earth, watched over by Anubis, who blesses the furrows with silence. She smiles faintly, remembering days spent as a girl visiting the fields outside Memphis, her sandals muddy, her hands smelling of earth. A priest from Philae arrives bearing messages from the temple of Isis. She receives him in the garden of hibiscus, a quiet place where the blossoms open only in morning and close by afternoon. The priest carries no urgency. His tone is even, reverent. They speak softly of tides and rituals, of the repair of a wall near the sacred pool, of a dream shared by one of the priestesses, a dream in which a heron walked backward across the stars. Cleopatra listens with full attention. She does not interrupt. She asks one question, then another, not as a skeptic, but as one who knows the value of mystery. After he departs, she remains seated beneath the hibiscus vines, watching the petals unfold. The color, a deep crimson at the center fading to white at the edge, reminds her of silk cloth dyed in layers by patient hands. She reaches out, gently touching one of the blossoms, feeling its smoothness, its fragile warmth in the sun. The day is warm now. The sky overhead is wide and pure, with only the faintest veil of cloud. Shadows shorten. The scent of sun-warmed stone rises from the palace pathways. She walks again, slowly, this time toward the amphora gallery where imported oils are stored, each sealed with wax and labeled in fine script. She opens one, myrrh from Punt, and breathes in deeply. It smells of spice and forest, of night and time. She closes it again and continues on. In the midday chamber, musicians wait once more. But today, they do not play. They speak instead of rhythm, of memory, of the way certain notes make the body remember things the mind has forgotten. Cleopatra sits among them, listening, her fingers resting lightly on her knees. One of the women recites a verse taught by her grandmother. The drum speaks because the earth has a heart. Cleopatra smiles. She does not offer her own verse. She only listens. Eventually, the music returns, quiet like breath. As the sun reaches its height, the queen closes her eyes and lets the notes carry her inward. No empire, no war, no fear. Only presence, only now. And still the day continues. And so the day drifts onward, not hurried, not delayed, simply unfolding in its natural course, as if time itself is drawn to Cleopatra's rhythm. The music fades once. More, not with a final chord, but like a ripple vanishing on still water. Cleopatra remains seated for a moment longer, eyes still closed, as the warmth of midday settles into the stones beneath her. When she rises, it is as if the air itself moves around her gently, the scent of myrrh and flowering orange blossoms, brushing against her as she walks. She returns to the inner gardens, where shade pools beneath the olive trees and the fountains murmur with slow, steady grace. The marble paths here are cool to the touch, having rested beneath the trees all morning. She walks them barefoot, each step a quiet reminder of earth, balance and belonging. At a shallow reflecting pool, she stops. The water is still, and her image floats upon its surface, not as a queen in regalia, but as a quiet woman with thoughtful eyes and lips slightly parted in thought. 2 doves fly low across the water, their wings cutting through their reflections. She watches them disappear into the branches, then lifts her gaze to follow the flutter of leaves above. A soft breeze moves through the courtyard, and with it comes the scent of crushed mint and the distant sound of temple bells ringing far. Beyond the palace walls, delicate, spaced, like a heartbeat slowing in deep rest, a cushion has been laid beneath the large tamarisk tree, one of her favorite resting spots in the early afternoon. Its long, feathery leaves create a dappled light, and the air here hums with bees lazily moving among the flowering herbs planted close to the ground. Cleopatra reclines, her robe gathered loosely at the waist, one arm folded beneath her head. A cup of cool barley water rests nearby, sweating faintly in the shaded heat. She does not drink immediately. She watches the movement of ants across a stone, the shadow of a leaf as it sways in the breeze, the way the sunlight deepens the gold in the fibers of her linen robe. This is not idleness, Dot. This is presence. This is mastery of time without force. After a long while, she takes a sip. The barley water is cool, earthy, and grounding. It settles into her belly with a kind of comfort that no feast could bring. A page from the lower scriptorium approaches with a small bundle of reed paper notes, observations from scholars, updates from the scribes, a poem copied from a trader's cargo ledgers. The boy kneels and hands them to her without a word. Cleopatra thanks him with a quiet nod. He disappears again, his footsteps nearly soundless on the stone. She reads each note slowly. The poem is simple, an ode to the shade of a fig tree, written in broken Greek and charmingly imperfect. She smiles as she reads it twice, then places it beside her on the grass. The scrolls are rolled again and tied with a soft cord dot as the sun begins to drift downward in the sky. The light changes. The air is no longer sharp with heat, but thick, with golden warmth, as if the entire palace has become wrapped in honey. Birds reappear from their hiding places, flitting through branches and chirping in the high shade. Servants quietly refill the water vessels near the garden edges. A woman with a broad fan walks the outer perimeter, waving the warm air slowly from side to side to keep the scent of herbs and oils in gentle motion. Cleopatra does not move to return indoors. She rises and walks once more to the reflecting pool. The water has changed. It is now filled with sky, pale blue near the edge, darkening at the center, touched with the first hints of orange and rose. She watches it deepen, then walks the outer path of the courtyard, her fingers trailing along the tops of the low shrubs, her touch feather-light. Dinner will be prepared soon, but there is no rush, no summons, no loud announcement or parade of trays. Just this slow, ancient rhythm of fire being kindled in the kitchen hearths, of vegetables being peeled with practiced hands, of lentils soaking in shallow clay bowls, of fish rubbed with coriander and thyme in her chamber. The meal is laid out on a small wooden table near the window. A spread of warm lentils, flatbread drizzled with honey, pickled radishes, soft dates wrapped in fig leaves, and a small dish of sesame oil for dipping. A single oil lamp burns low beside it. and the air carries the scent of roasted fennel and wood smoke. She eats slowly, as always, dipping the bread into the oil, chewing with attention, savoring the contrast between sweet and sour, soft and crisp. There is no wine tonight. Only a clay cup of lightly sweetened hibiscus tea, chilled with a single sliver of date ice. Outside, dusk paints the world. The city glows beneath a blanket of rose light. From her window, Cleopatra watches Alexandria shift from day to night. Rooftops kissed by gold, alleyways deepening into cool shadows, the lighthouse flame flickering to life like the eye of a god reopening after sleep. The harbor is calm. The sea, darkening, murmurs softly. She finishes her meal. A young servant removes the tray without a word. Bowing low, the queen stands at the window, the breeze lifting her hair slightly. Her hands rest lightly on the windowsill, and her eyes move across the city she calls home. She is not watching for change. She is not searching for meaning. She is simply present as the city exhales and the stars blink into view. Her attendants wait quietly behind her with warm cloths, soft oils, and a simple gown for sleep. The preparations are familiar, gentle, a shoulder unwrapped, hair brushed and rebraided, hands wiped clean with rose water, a final touch of oil pressed to her temples and neck. When the night has deepened and the moon has lifted above the sea, Cleopatra lies once more upon her linen-covered bed. No grand gesture, no declaration. She turns to her side, pulling the light blanket just below her shoulders, and lets the quiet take her. Her eyes close slowly. The breath slows, and the world sleeps with her. The chamber is silent. The last lamp flickers low, its golden glow casting long shadows against the stone walls, shadows that stretch and fade like the remnants of dreams. The wind has stilled outside the open windows. Only the occasional rustle of linen curtains and the faint creak of wood remain, not sounds of disruption, but of life continuing gently in the hushed. Cleopatra sleeps once more. Her body lies perfectly at ease, one arm resting across her waist, the other tucked beneath her pillow. Her breath moves in and out, steady, soft. The expression on her face is unreadable, as if even in rest she is a mystery. A poem with no final line. A constellation with one star always hidden from view. Beyond the palace walls, Alexandria lies wrapped in shadow and silence. The streets are empty, swept clean of voices. Homes flicker with candlelight in upper windows. The great library slumbers beneath its domes, scrolls resting in cedar cases, knowledge sleeping side by side with the forgotten. The harbor rocks gently. The ships at anchor, creaking and sighing as if they too are dreaming of open water high above. The stars form their slow, ancient patterns. No one watches them more closely than Cleopatra, even in her sleep, even in the stillness of this darkest hour. She belongs to the sky. Her ancestors spoke to the stars, worshipped them, read their courses like river currents. And she carries that memory, not in books, but in blood. The constellations turn. The moon rises higher, and with it comes a faint silver sheen across the palace floor. A servant passes through the hallway with careful steps. refilling the oil bowls outside the queen's chamber. The flame catches again, casting a soft amber glow across the threshold, then steadies. He retreats without sound. The light continues to flicker, a quiet vigil held not for fear, but for reverence. Time drifts dot, it does not hurry here, dot it stretches. Long and slow, like the Nile flowing through the desert, not rushing toward an end, but savoring every curve. Within the garden, the night flowers have opened. Thick-petaled and fragrant, they release their scent into the cool air. Jasmine, tuberose, moonflower. Their perfume rises like incense, floating through the open windows, reaching the queen's chambers with the gentlest caress. She stirs, only slightly, not to wake, not to rise, but as one who knows the shift in air, the tilt of the night. Her breath deepens again. The hours pass, and with them, the darkness begins to pale, just at the edges. A subtle bloom of gray light touches the eastern horizon. The first call of a bird pierces the quiet, tentative, as if testing the morning. Then another, then silence again. It is not yet dawn, but it is close. The in-between time. The hour when dreams end, but the world has not yet fully returned dot in her sleep. Cleopatra's body responds. A hand curls slightly. A foot shifts beneath the linen. Her breath changes rhythm, slower, then deeper, as if drawing something new into her lungs. The wind returns, just a whisper dot. It moves through the upper corridors of the palace, across the terraces, down the garden paths. It lifts petals from their resting places. It rustles the fronds of the date palms. It whispers against the carved doors and pillars. The queen sleeps on. Outside, Alexandria awakens once more. The scent of baking bread begins to rise from the lower ovens. A priest lights the first incense in the temple of Isis. A fisherman casts his net from the harbor wall, his silhouette cut against the rising light. The palace begins to hum again. Softly, gently dot clay vessels are placed at doorsteps. Flowers are picked and arranged. Curtains are drawn open. A day enters not with noise, but with rhythm dot and slowly, without haste. Cleopatra stirs. She does not open her eyes. She feels the light on her face first, the warmth of sun just beginning to spill across the bed, catching on the gold threads of her pillow, brushing her brow. She breathes in. The scent of jasmine still lingers. She sits up. The linen falls from her shoulders. The room is bathed in soft gold, as if the sun itself bows low through the window to greet her. She rises, stretching gently, her arms high above her head, her spine arching like the bow of a boat catching its first wind. She walks to the basin of water and washes her face with cupped hands. The water is cool. She exhales slowly, fully awake dot, and thus begins another day. In silence, in beauty, in the quiet embrace of a world that knows her not only as ruler, but as witness, as dreamer, as stillness itself. The day is young. The rhythm begins again, and so the new day unfolds, not as a repetition, but as a continuation of a single unbroken breath that began long before the sun first touched the Nile. Cleopatra steps into the light slowly. There is no sense of rush, No schedule to race toward, only the soft expansion of time that stretches wide across the palace corridors and gardens. The world waits for her, not because she commands it, but because she listens. This morning, like every morning, she moves as one with the rising sun, letting its warmth wrap around her as she walks along the mosaic-tiled hall that leads to the eastern courtyard. There, early dew still clings to the leaves. Bees buzz gently around clusters of lavender. Birds preen their wings along the rim of a marble fountain, whose trickle sounds like a quiet song. She kneels at the edge of the basin, cupping her hands to lift a bit of water to her face, not for cleanliness, but for ceremony. This is a gesture made by queens, mothers, children, a gesture that connects her to every Egyptian who has ever known morning. She walks barefoot again, the stones smooth beneath her soles, her body humming with the quiet strength of presence. Attendants pass at a distance, offering brief bows, never interrupting. They know this part of her day is sacred, the hour when she walks alone, thinks without speaking, and listens without seeking. A scribe from the lower library meets her beneath the pergola where grapevines climb and hang heavy with fruit. He carries with him a scroll and a question, a record of trade ships from Crete, a matter of tallies and silks. She listens quietly as he reads, nods once, then gestures for him to keep the scroll. No signature, no seal, only understanding. She trusts the work of hands. She remembers every face. That is her governance dot. She spends part of the morning in the Hall of Maps. This is not a place of warfare, but of curiosity. The walls are painted with vast murals, the Nile winding from the mountains of Kush to the delta's widening mouth, the Red Sea curling like a silver blade, the Mediterranean stretching westward into lands that breathe different languages and worship different stars. She touches the painted lines with her fingers, recalling the voice of each traveler who described them, the scent of the papyri upon which their stories were first written, the soft clink of ink pots. The hall smells of papyrus and ash and salt. Light filters through the clerestory windows high above, dappling the painted lands with shifting gold. She lingers longest by the depiction of the sea, not because of what it shows, but because of what it hides. Later, she returns to the palace terrace where a bowl of fruit has been placed beside a reclining couch. Grapes, sliced pomegranate, figs dusted with ground sesame. She eats without ceremony, placing each piece into her mouth with long pauses between bites, chewing slowly, her eyes following the movement of clouds across the brightening sky. The midday hours stretch. She does not fill them with announcements or games. She returns to her private chamber where the light is low and the air is cool. Incense is lit, blue lotus and cardamom. A servant brushes her hair in long strokes that begin at the crown and fall to the waist. Each motion is gentle, unhurried. Each stroke an echo of the thousands that came before it. Music drifts again from the inner courtyard. This time it is a single harp. The notes are long, suspended in the air like the curve of a bird's wing held against the wind. Cleopatra listens. With her eyes closed, her hands folded, her posture regal, even in repose. She lets the sound enter her body like breath, each vibration brushing the ribs, filling the chest, lifting the spine. The harpist cannot see her. They do not play for an audience. They play because the music must be heard. A scroll is brought to her, not a record, but a poem. Its verses are delicate, describing a river journey from Thebes to Elephantine, not in grand declarations, but in small details, the clink of pots, the splash of oars, the laughter of a boy fishing from a clay jar. She reads it 3 times, not because she must, because it deserves to be heard more than once. She steps into the shade garden as the sun begins its slow descent. The walls here are covered in ivy. A small pool sits at the center, circled by low stools and stone benches. On the surface of the water, flowers float, petals wide, white and pale yellow. The reflection of the queen joins them. She watches it ripple and blur as the breeze moves through. A healer arrives from the outer districts, a woman of middle age with hands stained from preparing salves. She brings no ailment. She comes to speak of a cure for grief, a paste of poppy and milk applied to the wrists and temples at dusk. Cleopatra listens, her gaze resting on the woman's hands. She thanks her and offers her a meal before she departs. They do not speak of titles, only the pulse of the body, the work of breath, the places where silence enters and heals. The day has aged now. Its light is heavy and golden. It falls through the arches in sheets, spilling across the stone like silk. The queen walks the long southern hall, past the statues of lions and winged goddesses, toward the outer portico where the air smells of sea salt and sun-warmed cedar. There, she reclines on a cushioned bench, watching as the harbor glows in the final light. Fishermen pull their boats to shore. Children run along the edge of the water-dot candles are lit in temple doorways. The city closes its eyes, not fully, not all at once, but like a person drifting to sleep with a smile on their lips. She remains there for a long while, hands folded in her lap, eyes reflecting the sky. Evening comes, and with it, the quiet meal. Simple dishes, lentils, grapes, fresh bread, a bowl of cucumber and vinegar, a small cup of date wine, barely touched. She eats slowly. The light fades. Servants move in shadows. The air cools, and when the time is right, she returns to her chamber, not to end the day, but to join the rhythm of the world as it enters stillness once again. She lies down. She exhales, and the stars return. And so the palace returns to silence. The moon, pale and solemn, climbs higher into the sky. Its light spills softly across the floor of Cleopatra's chamber, painting silver patterns on the walls, touching the folds of linen that drape her bed. Outside, the hush of night settles across Alexandria like a vast, protective shawl, woven from wind, sea, and shadow. Cleopatra lies still. Her body rests within the quiet she has cultivated all her life. Not the quiet of absence, but the quiet of fullness. A silence so complete that it holds every sound within it. The distant creak of ships, the whisper of leaves stirred by midnight breezes, the slow rhythm of her own breath. Time does not pass here. It lingers. Beyond the chamber, a servant checks. The wick of the last lamp. Its flame flickers, catching for a moment in the polished surface of a bronze bowl, then steadies again. He nods and withdraws. All is well. The queen sleeps, and in sleep she does not escape the world. She joins it more deeply. Her dreams do not rush or rise. They drift. They meander, as the Nile meanders, not to reach a destination, but to remember the feel of earth, of movement, of endlessness. Elsewhere in the palace, night has taken full hold. The birds have gone silent. The torches have dimmed to coal's dot in the great courtyard. A fountain still flows, the sound muffled by distance and dark. Its song continues as it always does, tracing the slow path of water on stone. No one listens, and yet it sings. Within the temple precincts, priests walk barefoot along cool paths. They offer no prayers tonight. They need none. The air itself is holy. Every breath is a hymn. A cat sleeps curled at the base of a statue of Bastet, its ears flicking once, then still. A candle burns beside it, its flame bent slightly by the breeze from the garden. No one tends it. It will burn out when it is ready. Beneath, the stars, the city SLUMB, ours dot, the queen dreams dot, and the world waits dot dawn. Again arrives slowly. There is no sound at first, only a brightening of the air. The color shifts from indigo to deep violet, then to ash gray, then to the faintest breath of gold. Somewhere, a bird begins to trill, its notes uncertain at first, then confident. Another joins it, then a third. And the city, brick by brick, leaf by leaf, breath by breath, begins to wake. Cleopatra opens her eyes, not with surprise, not with effort, but as one returns to the surface, after swimming deep through dream dot, she lies still for a long moment. Linen sheets are cool against her skin. The sound of distant footsteps in the corridor mark the passage of time, slow, measured. She breathes in the scent of morning. Crushed thyme, warm stone, bread already baking far below, that she rises, not abruptly, but like the turning of a page. She washes again, the water catching the morning light in its surface, scattering tiny prisms. Across the basin, a thin cloth towel, warmed by the early sun, waits for her. She dresses simply, a gown of soft white linen, a thin gold band around her wrist, her hair braided in a long rope, tied at the end with a strip of blue-dyed cotton. She steps out onto the eastern portico. The harbor shines. Mist rises from the water like breath from a dreaming god. Ships rock gently at anchor, sails furled, ropes, creaking in rhythm with the tide. On a nearby rooftop, a woman kneels to gather herbs, placing them gently into a woven basket. Her motion is steady. Reverent Cleopatra watches. She does not think of rule, or politics, or memory. She thinks of light, of breath, of the way the sea glitters when no one is watching. And as she stands there, wrapped in the silence of morning, the palace around her stirs, but not loudly, quietly, smoothly, as though it, too, breathes in rhythm with the queen dot in the lower gardens. The hibiscus blooms again dot in the kitchens. Flatbread rises dot in the halls. Sandals scuff softly against stone. And the day, as always, begins, but not for conquest, not for command dot simply to be dot, and so it flows on dot dot, and so the rhythm of the day continues, not as something to be measured, but as something to be, felt to be absorbed like warmth through skin, like scent carried on the breeze. Cleopatra turns from the portico and steps slowly through the eastern colonnade. The columns rise tall around her, painted in soft ochres and worn blues, their tops carved in the shape of lotus blossoms just beginning to open. Between the pillars, vines climb in lazy spirals, and small lizards warm themselves on the stones, unmoving except for the flick of a tongue or the twitch of a tail. She walks without hurry, her feet brushing against the cool mosaic tiles that pattern the floor in waves and river reeds, crocodiles and cranes, each piece placed by hand long before she was born. Her fingers trail along the fluted edge of a column, pausing briefly on a small patch of moss that clings to the shaded side, as if she's greeting an old friend. Down below, in the outer court, young scribes read aloud to one another beneath. The fig trees, not loudly, not performatively, but like river water passing over smooth stones. One recites a hymn to Hathor. Another, a fragment of a love letter rescued from a broken amphora. Cleopatra pauses on the stair above them, not to correct or praise, but simply to listen. The sound of youthful voices drifting up through leaves is, she thinks, one of the purest forms of beauty.